Welcome to Conversations with Chuck Hester, a weekly podcast designed to inform and entertain you, all while introducing you to some really interesting and inspiring people. And I'm your host, Chuck Hester. My guest today is a very dear friend and networker extraordinaire, Robert Seeger. Bob is a Chief Information Officer, Senior Vice President with more than 25 years experience bridging business and technology. But that's not why he's my guest this week. Bob is the host of Coffee with Bob that can be seen on LinkedIn on a daily basis, and he uses that platform to bring people together to expand their reach and network. His philosophy of one connection can change a life has done just that, connecting people together to grow and strengthen their networks, their business, and ultimately their lives. Bob, welcome to Conversations.
Thanks, Chuck. I really appreciate it. I love being on the opposite end of these things these days. Like you said, I do the Coffee with Bob every day, and it can be fun to be on the opposite end. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I was telling folks in the post, it's like going, it's an old conversation because we've known each other. What are we going on now? 10 years, probably, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. Absolutely. And,
I think we both had colored hair last time we first met each other.
Some of us had more hair than
hair.
Yeah, exactly. So, that's one thing I don't like about headphones, by the way. Anyway, it makes me look like Yul Brynner. Long story short on all of this, what I want to be able to do is kind of set the stage, if you will. So give us information about you, who you are, what you do, the day job, all of that kind of good stuff that goes along with that. And then we'll get into networking and Coffee with Bob as we go along.
Yeah, awesome. So as you mentioned, my name is Robert Seeger. Most people call me Bob. And I am a Chief Information Officer, Vice President of Technology, which means I run a technology department for a small family-owned financial services firm. We do temporary import and export documentation, and I love it. But obviously with the pandemic, temporary import exports has slowed down a little bit, but we're chugging along. I consider myself a servant leader. By that I mean that I like to surround myself with people that are much smarter than I am to bring them together to make them into a more cohesive team. I like to use the tagline, we just make technology work. We don't install or we don't push technology for technology's sake. We like to understand what the users need, how they're going to use the technology, and how it's going to benefit them. So, for example, we actually put stories together that tell the tale of how a user will use a certain technology. And not only how they'll push the buttons or turn the knobs or print the documentation, how does it make them feel inside, right? How does it help them make them feel when it comes to accomplishing their job? So we try to put the human portion of feeling and emotion and satisfaction into the technology itself. And when you do that, you get much more satisfaction from the users, and you get much more satisfaction from the teammates because they're feeling like they're accomplishing more. So, and I've been doing that for over 25 years now, and I enjoy it. And I started with technology back when Amazon was just a dream on a chalkboard in a garage, and the only way you got on the internet was through a local ISP or AOL of all things, and most people can remember that.
Yeah.
And then I've just kind of been on LinkedIn for a while and have decided to give back to LinkedIn. Chuck's been a terrific inspiration to me for these last 10 years about paying it forward. And now I have my Coffee with Bob show. And what I do there is really about introducing, just like Chuck's doing now with Conversations, introducing people, products, and services to all my connections that are out there and all my followers are out there to get the word out. You'll hear from different LinkedIn, experts that'll say, don't sell directly. You can't do that. And I tend to agree with that, when it comes to like the direct messages and stuff like that. But that's the reason why I host Coffee with Bob, to give those people the exposure, to let them sell. And I've interviewed people from job seekers, which is always fun, helping them get jobs, to debuting new products, to debuting new services, to just doing the show. For example, Chef Jill Sullivan, one of my good friends and connections from a while back, we actually did a cooking show one time on Coffee with Bob, where she took us through one of her cooking processes, which was a lot of fun.
Awesome. So, you have some amazing connections, and quite frankly, I use you as an example of the student teaching the teacher. Quite frankly, because the softball question there was, how did you get started on LinkedIn? But that was good 10 plus years ago, involved with that. But I look to you these days for inspiration, quite frankly, on how to use LinkedIn and how well you're using it. You, of all people, because normally when I do seminars or speeches, I always talk about my connection level at right now 21,005. You're past that, and you also do a lot of really cool pay it forward work. And let's give a couple examples here, Bob. I mean, one of my favorites is probably one of my best friends, a guy named Michael Watkins. And you had Michael on. Michael is a former homeless person who then got himself all the way through Campbell University, got his college degree, had some issues that came up right around the time that the Oregon fires were occurring. And so he was basically, again, homeless, looking for another apartment. And he said, instead of me sitting around going, well, I'm in bad shape and what the heck do I do? He volunteered, because he has in the past, but he volunteered with the Red Cross, and they sent him to Oregon, and he spent close to a month in Oregon helping out there. So those type of people need exposure, as I do, but you do so much better. And the other example I would use is Johnny Reddick, because I had her. She was actually my last guest because of thanks to Texas. I was not on the air last week, but we won't go down that path. But anyway, yeah. Johnny Reddick, a great person, former CHP officer and executive. But I was introduced to Johnny through you and through your Coffee with Bob with her. So, it's a great way to pay it forward. So I guess I will ask that question, but when did you first discover LinkedIn in general? I mean, and how did you use it back in the day, quote unquote?
Yeah. So back in the day, and I just found this out in one of my Coffee with Bob interviews, actually. It was Coffee with Bob Live. Actually, it wasn't Coffee with Bob. I was on Rush John's pirate broadcast last week. And one of the viewers had mentioned that they did they figured out a way to figure out what your LinkedIn number was.
Right.
And apparently my LinkedIn member number is in the top 2% or the first 2% of the people who joined LinkedIn way back when. So my LinkedIn number my member number was just over 100,000 was the number. And now there's 400 million people on LinkedIn or so right now.
760 million.
There you go. So I was one of the originals. And back in the day, it was for us people first getting on, it was an online resume, right? There wasn't the type of engagement that you have now. And that's evolved more so over the last, I want to say 8 years or so. And it's only been over the last 5 years that I've really started engaging, because my connections were building and my followers were building. And I finally decided that I needed to somehow give back, because it's much more than an online resume, right? Now with LinkedIn, there are so many opportunities to learn. There's so much knowledge you can gain from watching people's posts and following their content. And there's inspiration you can gain there. I mean, it's unbelievable the things that I've found just through my own engagement on LinkedIn. So that's why I started Coffee with Bob, was to kind of give back to that, to help expose people to other connections. I say all the time, one connection can change a life. And I don't just say that because it makes a good catchphrase. I say that because I really do believe that. You just never know what that one connection is going to do for you, or how that one connection is going to help you, right? Whether you're a job seeker, right? Or whether you're looking to start a new business, or you have a new product you want to pitch, or get exposure for, whatever the case is, or you just want to simply grow your network. Being able to expose yourself through someone who has a lot of followers and a lot of connections like you, right? Or Rush Johns as an example, or any other of the influencers, so to speak. It's a blessing that you can pass on to somebody else.
Yeah. Which is so very cool. And I'll not to dominate, but I'll mention a couple of things here. Back in 2003-4 timeframe, about the same time you were getting on, I was getting on, relocating to Raleigh, North Carolina. I was approached by iContact, which is the email marketing software company, and they had my LinkedIn resume printed out, and so it was in fact a LinkedIn profile was my resume basically. But the other part of that, which is back in the day in 2004, LinkedIn was a job seekers network basically. And I was written up in the New York Times with one other person about how they got the job on LinkedIn. That today would not happen because about 4 years ago, LinkedIn came forward and said, we're going to be a content marketing platform for business. And that's going to be the bottom line. And a networking place where you can connect with really cool people. So, and let's talk a little bit about that. I think we may be breaking a LinkedIn Live rule here, talk about LinkedIn a lot, but that's okay. That's who I am, and you as well. It's a good part of it. So how do you see LinkedIn? How has LinkedIn evolved for you over the last couple of years, other than Coffee to Bob? I know you've been doing that, but what changes have you seen that you went, oh, okay, that makes sense? Or, and I'll give my example in a minute, but or the one or two changes that were made that you went, really? Why did you bother to do that? So what's the good and bad of LinkedIn that you've seen over the last couple of years?
Well, I'll be honest. When LinkedIn started going more towards the Facebook-like type of setup, I was a little put off with that. And I didn't think it was going to work. But then when I started realizing and started seeing how people were engaging, right, and being free with their knowledge and sharing it more openly, then I became more impressed with it. And that's kind of when I really jumped in with both feet. My concern has always been, and continues to be today, is that LinkedIn will fall into that Facebook trap where you get a lot of, for better lack of term, vipers out there. I know that there's an issue these days. You can talk to people like Rachel Beck or Leslie August, and there are issues with bullying on LinkedIn. There are issues with sexual harassment on LinkedIn, which I think there's no room for that. And I think we should always be pushing against that. But that said, for the most part, most of the content that you see on LinkedIn is very positive, very uplifting, very knowledgeable, sharing, and you can just about find anything you want to learn about on LinkedIn. And if you follow that person, engage with that person, you can gain a lot of knowledge with very little cost, right, to yourself. But I do like the way that they're really promoting networking, and I do like the way people are understanding that your network is your currency, right? And seeing beyond just your own little borders, so to speak. I remember when I was first on LinkedIn, I wasn't connected with anyone unless they were in the Chicagoland area, because I wasn't interested in moving at that point, and I didn't want to make connections that would take me, potential job opportunities out of the Chicagoland area. And it wasn't until later on that I realized I was missing out on a lot of different viewpoints. I was missing out on some different opinions, missing out on different knowledge by not expanding my network. Mm-hmm. And that's the one thing I would say about LinkedIn that I still don't like to this day is their connection limit. I mean, to this day, you can only connect to 30,000 people, which I know sounds like a lot, but what, people like you and I, Chuck, we're at our 30,000 connection limit, it's not as easy, right? It seems to me that if you're going to be a networking platform where you want people to network, where you want people to engage with each other, you need to take those limits on those connections off, especially if you're paying to be a LinkedIn member. For sure, I think you should take those connection limits off. Yeah. Followers are great, but it's harder to engage with followers than it is with connections.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with that. We'll drill down to specifics. I mean, you taught me to a certain extent. One of the cooler things that you do on a regular basis is you will post a Coffee with Bob. And then what you do in the comments is then you tag 15, 20, 30 some odd people to be able, and mainly the reason behind that is he has some really cool people you should connect with, folks. And I greatly appreciate being included in that crowd. And I've connected with some really interesting people as a result of that. But that is one area where a lot of people say, well, how do I get more engagement? And I work with clients on a regular basis that look to my LinkedIn consulting, and they're saying, well, I'm not getting engagement, or they think they're getting engagement, and that is basically 15 likes on a post and no comments or no shares or whatever it may be. One of the techniques that, quite frankly, I've honed as a result of working with you is that, let's set up a list, and then we rotate that list out and we tag certain people, 5 people at a time or whatever it may be. Leslie Levy-August, who's a good friend of both yours and mine, and a former client. I'm the one that taught her how to do that as well, and she's killing LinkedIn. So it seems to be working well. So let's go. I don't want to go negative necessarily, but talk to me about.
So here, I want to toss one thing in. When it comes to tagging, you'll get different opinions, right? There are some LinkedIn experts that say don't tag. You're gaming the algorithm. And then there are other people say, well, do tag because you want to gain the algorithm.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do it because I tag. I don't just tag anyone. I have a very specific list of people that I tag, and I tag the people that I think will bring value to other people's lives.
All right.
Right. I tag people that I think you should follow, and you should follow them because they will bring value to you. If it helps raise up the awareness on my post, even better. People will tell you that likes and views and shares are all vanity metrics, and you shouldn't worry about that. But when I'm trying to help other people gain exposure, I'm looking at likes and views and shares because I want them to be out there. I want them to be heard. I want them to be seen. So I think when it comes right down to it, it's all going to matter what you're hoping to gain. And the one thing I would say is that LinkedIn is a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Yeah. And especially, and we have a mutual friend, Monty Clark, who is a really good LinkedIn expert as well. Yes. And it's just, we've talked about this off and on as far as, okay, the joke amongst us LinkedIn trainers, and the 10 years ago that was 15 of us, and now it's 5,000 of us. But the joke amongst is that somewhere in LinkedIn corporate headquarters, and I'm sure I'm going to get dinged on this, but there's a conference room where the minions get together on a weekly, monthly, I don't know what basis, and they say, okay, so how can we mess with the algorithm today, and what can we do to? Yeah, and I'll shout Monty out. I said, and specifically, how can we frustrate the heck out of Monty Clark? Because that's one of his pet peeves. But anyway, no, you're right. I mean, gaming the algorithm, quite frankly, it's a bad term if you're scraping and you're, spamming and doing whatever. But if you're manipulating the algorithm in such a way to make sure you get better exposure for your people or your content or whatever it may be. I'm not talking about let's put the sales brochure or here's the 20% off sale type stuff up. I'm talking about exposure for guys like Michael Watkins or Johnny or whoever it may be, to be able to connect. And again, all the way back around with Coffee with Bob, you are doing a service by connecting people who may not know each other, but who will value the chance to connect with somebody and build their network and strengthen their network, and what works with that. So I think that's amazing that you continue to do that. I'm going to ask the question. We keep kind of avoiding questions. So what do you not like about the platform, about LinkedIn?
I think I mentioned that earlier. I don't like the 30,000 limit.
Right.
I'm not a big fan of LinkedIn groups. I don't like the way they operate right now. I think there can be some improvement there. I belong to a couple different groups that used to be on LinkedIn that we just moved them over to Slack as an example, just because it's a better way to communicate back and forth. I'm not a big believer in pods. I know there's a lot of them out there. And I think they're fine. They have their space. I wish LinkedIn would take some of the live limits off. Right. I know a lot of people that are still waiting in line to get their live, like we're doing right now. And I've done lives too, that are waiting in line to do lives that have some really interesting content. So I don't know why they're holding back on that. other than that, I do like the direction that they're going. I wish they'd be a little bit more open to work with tools like Hootsuite and other tools like that. They're not very open to that stuff, so it makes it a little more difficult for folks like you, Chuck, that are in marketing that might want to use those type of tools to make sure that they're consistent across all platforms.
Right.
So, for example, if you're using Hootsuite or any of the other third-party applications out there to manage social media, and you want to post on LinkedIn, you can't tag people, you can't do all kinds of stuff with it, right? Yeah.
Yep.
And that's not because of the application. That's because of LinkedIn itself keeping itself closed off like that. So it'd be nice if they could be a little more open too.
Yeah, and there's improvements, and a couple of things to mention here because you brought up groups. I am of the true belief that groups are going to be revitalized in 2021, and from being an IT guy, developers only have a certain amount of bandwidth that they for their sprints. Best way to describe it. And so they decided to do one of the things that I really do not like about LinkedIn, and that is concentrate on stories. Which they launched in November, December timeframe, whatever it may be. I think that's going to die on the vine, but more importantly, I think groups is going to come back. When I speak on LinkedIn, I talk about the fact that there's 2.7 million groups on LinkedIn right now. They're kind of the uncharted territory, if you will, in a place where you can take advantage of them because people aren't paying that much attention to them. You can connect directly with group members and those type of things. But longer story here, short. I think the groups are going to make a comeback in 2021. I'm sure as heck hoping because I really like the functionality you can do. And at the same time, what you mentioned, all of my mastermind groups, every single one, which I think I'm on 6 or 7 right now, are all based on Facebook, and which including a LinkedIn trainers mastermind group on Facebook, which I think is terribly ironic and sad at the same time. So yeah, anyway, long story short, and then when we talk about live, I did get a chance to, I think it was through Vidyard or StreamYard, one of the two. The folks who run LinkedIn Live basically have said, and it took me 2 years and 3 applications to get my LinkedIn Live. And that only happened when I started revitalizing my content on a weekly basis and talking about the fact that, I'm posting daily and I also have 20,000 plus connections. But they likened it, and this is for my listeners, my viewers, they likened it to rolling college applications. So don't apply every single week, but apply every month or two. And there may be some new minion in there. Minion is my way of saying millennial. Minion in there who is, had not seen that application before. So you still have a chance. So there's hope out there, guys. There truly is. But all the way back around to your point, there are some really cool people who are not on LinkedIn Live that should be, that have amazing content. And even a law firm that I've worked for as a client of mine, they've got some amazing content now, especially on immigration law. And she would, this managing partner would be a great LinkedIn Live host, no doubt about it. So anyway.
Well, and that's one of the things that I've been actually reaching out to people saying that, hey, I know you don't have a LinkedIn Live. I do. Come on, let's do a coffee with Bob Live, and I'll let you run the show. Just to focus on them. And I've already got a couple lined up that we're going to do that.
That's awesome. That is really good. Yeah, I mean, my bandwidth is once a week for an hour, and it's live at noon Central Time. So I'm actually booked all the way through mid-May. But and you and I talked about this offline, considering maybe a after dark edition as well. But bandwidth, again, bandwidth. Let's talk about, and there is no such thing as the new normal. It is the new reality that we live in. I just recently did one of my favorite things, by the way, to use on LinkedIn for content is polls. And I just did a poll on, 2021 for first couple months in. Is it 2020 all over again? Are we moving forward? How are you feeling about it? It's almost a 50-50. A lot of people were saying it's too early to tell, but, not as many said, 2020 is gone and 2021 is getting better. What's your take on 2021 in general and the new reality that we live in? How are things going for you, your company, the connections that you have?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first way I would answer that is that 2021 is not the dumpster fire of 2020. That's for sure. Things are starting to come back. I think as more people get vaccinated and as more people sort of venture out a little bit more, things are going to improve. It depends on who you listen to, right? I mean, I've read news stories and heard news stories that there are quote unquote experts that are saying that we're going to be opened back up by April, May. I don't think that's going to be the case. But I do think fourth quarter things are going to start returning to normal, at least more normal. I think the new normal, though, is going to be much more social distancing, which is a shame. I think the new normal is going to be masks, at least for the foreseeable future, until we reach that, holy grail of herd immunity. But for the most part, I think towards the fourth quarter, if not in the fourth quarter or end of third quarter, we're going to be seeing returns to normal levels, or at least at pre-2020 levels.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to take off as an economy or businesses until maybe 2022, early 2022, because I think by then people will be comfortable and will be open more. But again, if you're a global business, right? If you're used to doing business beyond U.S. borders, you got to wait for the rest of the world to catch up.
True.
Right? The rest of the world's got to get inoculated so that you can start doing more international travel.
Right.
It doesn't matter if the entire United States is vaccinated by May or June, right? Because if Canada is not going to be inoculated until first quarter of 22, and if Mexico is not going to finish being inoculated until fourth quarter of 22, I'm just making it up.
Right.
That makes things a little bit more difficult, right? Then we become much more isolated. So I think as it opens up, I think as the vaccines make it out there and opens up, things will start bouncing back.
Yeah, and side story there, you and I had not physically met until we actually met in Mexico.
Yeah.
When you were in the travel industry at that time, and I came down for a conference and spoke down there in Cancun. But and also, I was recently looking because, as a single guy, I was like, okay, I really want to start traveling again. And one of the resorts down in Mexico, basically, they have on-site testing set up that because if you're going to go to Mexico in order to re-enter, is you have to have negative tests.
Right.
So they've actually added that concierge service to be able to do that, which I think is slightly ironic. And you're seeing it because and again, folks, if you have not watched any Coffee at Bob, you need to subscribe to that. You need to take a look at it on a regular basis. And a quick shout out, by the way, one of our favorite people, Adam Sinkus, is commenting on how we're his two favorite connectors. So shout out to Adam there as well. But in the process of talking to the people that you do and the clients that I have developed over the last 6 to 8 months, I use a term called passion pivot, which is basically I'm home, I'm doing, COVID's causing me to work from home. I have some more time to be able to really pursue what I want to do. And a lot of people are leaving their day jobs and starting up businesses. Mm-hmm. Leslie August is a good example of, as a bullying consultant now, and an amazing person to be able to do that, and several other startup coaches and the like that I did never think I was going to have as clients are now clients. But I applaud passion pivot for folks that are being able to do that. So I call those COVID blessings, quite frankly. Mm-hmm. The other part of that is the work from home mentality that's occurring now. And when large companies like Salesforce and Microsoft and whomever say, you know what, work from home is going to be the norm as opposed to the exception.
Yeah, it is now. I mean because they're even within our business, right? We had just months prior to the pandemic first starting, we had transitioned to a cloud-based phone system. Mm-hmm. And we were actually in the process of moving our entire infrastructure to the cloud. By about May, we'll have our entire infrastructure in the cloud, and now we won't even need offices anymore. Mm-hmm. But we learned very quickly that we were more easily able to transition to this remote work than we would have been had we not started that cloud transition. Right. And we're looking at, we probably won't even have an office anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's industries we talked about travel, but there's industries such as office leasing and the like that cause issues. And a shout out to you, Mr. Sinkus, because Adam Sinkus is involved with a really cool organization that basically has virtual offices available to you.
He's a virtual landlord.
Yeah, he's a virtual landlording, and there's some really interesting things going on with that. So get a chance to take a look at that as far as that goes. But we're not only that, but the mentality has become, as a worker, lack of a better way to put that, I'm so used to working at home that I will have trouble transitioning back. And then the other part of that is, as the employer, you go, well, okay, do we really need all this infrastructure, cafeterias, whatever it may be, to be able to do that? And I saw this on a job listing the other day. I thought, this is really cool. There is now work at home stipends, which allow you to buy headphones, whatever you need, or the like. So anyway, long story short, Bob, we could go on forever. You know how this all works out as far as that goes. But I want to give you a chance to do, my last two standard questions. If you were to leave my viewers, listeners, with a couple of things that you would want to leave with them, what would you tell them?
Wow. That's a great question. If you want to be on, well, I'll give a shameless plug for Coffee with Bob. If you want to be on Coffee with Bob, reach out to me on LinkedIn. If you go to my About on my profile, you'll find my calendar link, and let's schedule something, because I really, truly, honestly believe that one connection can change a life. And if you're looking for help from a technology perspective, or if you're looking for a servant leader mentor or something like that, hit me up. I'm happy to help. I'm happy to be involved, because I want to be that one connection that changes a life as well too. And I'd like to think that I've helped change quite a few lives since I've been doing Coffee with Bob and since I've been out there. So I'm happy to do that as well.
That's excellent. I greatly appreciate that, Bob. Like I said, we could have this conversation going forward on a regular basis, and we do, honestly, offline and through LinkedIn and wherever it may be. Again, if you have not seen Coffee with Bob, and this is the cooler thing, and there's a phrase I use called the small big, which is basically it's for Bob to say, I will spend 9 minutes with you on Coffee with Bob, and then promote it. That's kind of a easy thing for him to do, to a certain extent, be able to do that. But that can be huge for somebody who might be looking for a job, or who might want to promote their business, or whatever it means. So the small big is always something that interesting. And the other part of that, folks, if you're hearing this correctly, this is a man with 30,000 connections and more followers than that. And he's on LinkedIn on a daily basis. And yet he's saying, reach out to me with my LinkedIn profile, and let's get you on Coffee with Bob. So that philosophy, if you would, and there are several other influences that you and I both know. I always tell my people, hey, you know what? If you don't ask the question, the only answer you're going to get is no. Right. And the best influencer you could find is one that is incredibly accessible. And there are several out there that are role models for me as far as that goes. So all good stuff and I appreciate the time for that. Adam is continuing to comment back and forth there, so we'll just let that go and go as far as that goes. So, Bob, I want to thank you again for being on Linked Conversations with Chuck Hester. We're going to wrap it up here, and again, I appreciate your time.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on the show.
That's good. So again, this is another episode of Conversations with Chuck Hester, and a kind of a program note, if you will. I'm actually in Houston, Texas. Some people don't know that, but I was unfortunately part of the weather apocalypse that occurred last week, with no power, no lights, no electricity, no water, all of that stuff that we had to go through. I was blessed in that I did not suffer the way some of my fellow Texans did as well. And so, by the way, if there's anybody out there that needs help, please reach out. My network is strong, and we can possibly help you out there too. But one of my favorite parts of the show, and Adam Sinkus has mentioned here a couple of times, but it's the Pay It Forward Minute. We have, if folks don't know about this is called the Pay It Forward Tuesdays Initiative. I always like to shout out the Pay It Forward 6 now, which is Adam Sinkus, Jennifer Radke, Bob Shears, Lori Marrero, and Brian Basilica. We are accepting new nominations for our March recipient now. So if you have someone who you think would be a good nominee, get in touch with me through LinkedIn or visit payitforwardtuesdays.org for more information. What we basically do is provide 30-minute sessions with 6 different consultants, 3 hours of consulting for a deserving 501c3 charity or an up-and-coming entrepreneur. And also, if you're a company or organization that provides products and services to that type of community, we're looking for sponsors in 2021 for our 2021 recipients. It's a great way to pay it forward while building brand equity in your community. So contact me for more details and more information. And next week, my guest is John Matthews. This is an interesting one. Former actual CEO of Jimmy John's, now founder and CEO of Great Cat Enterprises, a firm that specializes in retail consulting as well. So look forward to that. And please feel free to share this podcast with your friends and connections. This replay will post very soon on Facebook and my YouTube channel. Also through Anchor FM, the audio podcast can be found on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple, and several different areas. And if you're interested in learning more about how you can improve your marketing and LinkedIn presence, contact me on LinkedIn and mention this podcast for a free 15-minute discovery call. So that's it for this week. Until next time, this is Chuck Hester reminding you to stay well, stay connected, and always pay it forward.